There's real concern about drones and their potential use for terrorism, mass casualty incidents, interference with air traffic, as well as corporate espionage and invasions of privacy.
Technology, though, is really changing how rapidly we have to adapt. People used to ask me, what keeps you up at night? What keeps me up at night is the speed of change.
The nation's critical infrastructure provides the essential services that underpin American society and serve as the backbone of our nation's economy, security, and health. We know it as the energy we use in our homes and businesses, the water we rely on, the transportation that moves us, and the goods we use, the stores we shop in, and the communication systems we rely on to stay in touch with friends, family, and to run our businesses.
For the critical infrastructure part, the threat is that people can surveil in ways they never could before, because physical security, if you look anywhere, it's always about badges, locked doors, and fences, barbed wire fences, because it's not three-dimensional security, it's two. So now people that have critical infrastructure now have to think that people can come in from the third dimension, the aerial side. So now a fence is not going to keep people out necessarily.
An aircraft's easy to track, and we can hear an aircraft and see it and then go to the airport and investigate the pilots. But a drone you can just put right back in your car and just drive away. Now drones can take great high definition video, and they can also scan with various sensors, infrared, LiDAR, and get a very accurate, detailed picture of a landscape and take that into a computer and then build it up from the ground into an animation, and it's almost like that you were there. Very, very precise.
The potential for drone attacks against just one of our critical infrastructures can affect structures that have interdependencies. If a UAS incident occurred at a power grid near a critical water facility, it could impact those operations, even though it was not directed at them.
We'll be not only handling our regular weekly season games at stadiums, 31 stadiums all across the United States. And drones present a huge challenge to us every single game. We have put some plans in place, we have some mitigation strategies, but we don't have all the answers yet.
Too often when people think of counter unmanned aerial systems capabilities, they're thinking about military capabilities. They're thinking about armed forces having to protect themselves from an adversary's, whether it be a state or a non-state actor, but from an adversary's capability to either attack them directly or at least provide some intelligence and some surveillance information about them, their position, their disposition. But we all know today that's not in fact the case. As I mentioned in my introduction to the second day of this Counter UAS Summit, more and more counter UAS capabilities are required at every level of government, in the private sector, all the way down to the individual person or groups of people want to protect their privacy. So I hope that the short video clip from a longer video by Department of Homeland Security whet everyone's appetite a little bit to really dive into the commercial sector's UAS requirements and what some of the technology gaps are and their solutions. In order to address this topic, I just laid this out in 3 different lines of effort that you see there on the slide. I want to make sure that we've got some sort of organized way to approach this and to open up the discussion. This is not going to be a very long brief, because what I really want to do is to present some ideas, and then that will then generate discussion among the group. Questions, discussion, either that occurs immediately following this briefing or later on in a breakout session or at some other period of time. When I talk about the emerging threat environment, I really break it up into two parts. You see the top of the screen there, and those are activities, and then the bottom of the screen in the ovals, what you see are different elements that may be participating or conducting those activities. So smuggling, clearly smuggling of drugs, other contraband, whether it be across an interstate border, whether it be trying to get drugs or some other contraband into a prison. UASs are being used for that at an increasingly large rate. Weaponization, I've got a little video I'm going to show you after this. Prohibited surveillance and reconnaissance, intellectual property theft, and intentional disruption and harassment. And in that area, what I include is interference with aviation operations. And then on the bottom in the circles, again, these are different elements or intentions. For instance, could be terrorism, could be criminal activity, could be a state or a non-state actor trying to get access to intelligence and other information that may benefit them in one way or another. What you're seeing here is a UAS operated by ISIS in Iraq, and you see they've just got explosive devices that they've attached on there. Almost looks like a shuttlecock, and if you don't think it could be accurate, watch.
There's other drone detection systems that are used at other prisons, but nothing comparable to the one that we're currently using. Ours tells you where it's at and where it's moving to.
We know where the controller is, where the drone is, where to go, how far it is from the prison. I sleep with my computer by the bed. When I get an alarm, I wake up and I go into action. This is one we caught in a tree line. They take a S-hook like you hang a plant on, and then they attach a bag to that with the contraband inside. 99.9% is at night. So this is a real-time flight here. What you're seeing here is a depiction of a drone flight, and this shows me its path. And as you see, this drone flew over the facility, and that's where they start throwing resources in to try to start throwing some heat in on these people. We want this to stop. It's not common to catch the people at the moment because we know they can see you from the air. So there's a big chance they're going to get away. There's not a prison that's not fighting this issue. If they say they're not facing it, they're just not admitting to it.
I spoke earlier about something as simple as maintaining your privacy. And here you see a drone operator deciding he's going to first look in people's windows, and he identifies a female on the roof. And unfortunately, this is all she's got to fight back against that drone. I want to look now at what some of the technological needs are in this counter UAS space, particularly when you're looking at small UASs. One of the challenges here is that when you start asking the question, what is it that we need to be able to do and develop? Unfortunately, a lot of times the answer is it depends. And while that's often true in a lot of instances, it's especially true, I think, in this area, because depending upon what type of site or area you're trying to protect, what type of threat you are expecting potentially to be used against the asset, it's certainly going to drive the required capabilities of that solution. So if you can use a kinetic means to intercept or to defeat a UAS, or what kind of kinetic solution are you able to use depending upon where you are. So that's one of the challenges. But overall, the areas of the technology that's required, it really comes in the areas of improved sensors, defeat mechanisms, and as well as artificial intelligence. How do we blend all of those sensors, the signals, all of the understanding of how UASs operate, what their capabilities are, in order to, one, be able to identify that it in fact is a potentially hostile UAS, and two, what is it we can do about it? First area I'd look at is the technology required to support the the ability of a system to independently detect drones operating in the vicinity of the system. Certainly, if transponders are adopted in the near future by the FAA, one might assume that relying on that by itself, it would not be sufficient. Most people would imagine that someone operating with some sort of malicious intent would certainly simply turn that off if they knew that was the way that you were going to detect their operating. So we've got to look at radar, electro-optical, infrared cameras, and even acoustic sensors to identify and to detect those drones operating in the system, in the vicinity of the system. We can also look at frequency scanning equipment to detect signals that are transmitted between the operator and the UAS, assuming that that in fact is happening, and it's not a UAS that's simply flying a predetermined route guided by GPS and doesn't even just collects its information or conducts its mission and does not have any requirement to transmit information back during the flight. So that's a challenge with that. Once a drone's detected, the ability to locate and identify it as a hostile drone is a significant challenge. The ability to separate out a potentially hostile drone from a non-hostile drone, depending upon how it's operating. I think this is one of the greatest challenges that we need to look at. What technologies can help us here? Potentially, this is one of the most important areas that artificial intelligence could help us with. Once drones become even more prevalent, and we have drones out in communities that are delivering packages, delivering mail, delivering medicines to people, or whatever it is, perhaps there's a way that through the use of AI that the methods by which those types of UASs operate can be identified so that we can focus on the UASs that are operating in some different manner. So this is an enormous challenge, because even if you're able to do that, then certainly the countermeasure to that from bad actor would be to, of course, mimic how the other UASs operate. So this is a really significant challenge, and I think there's a lot of fertile ground for additional work to be done here. This third characteristic of counter UAS capabilities are providing notice to and warning off drone operators. Initially, as I thought through this and assessed this, I was a little bit stumped, because my going in assumption, and many people's assumption, is that if a UAS operators ought to be aware of and comply with any sort of restrictions on where they can fly, what altitude they could fly, etc., that anyone that's not doing that is breaking the law, and you just need to go ahead and take it down. So why is there a need to provide notice and warn off operators? Just take them down. Well, like everything else in life, it's not that simple. I came up with the following scenario. There's a bad car accident just outside a major airport in the United States. Of course, it's on a major highway, and as everyone here knows, who's listening here knows, that there's almost always significant traffic there. So there's a bad accident. There's several people who are in critical condition, and they need blood immediately. There's no place to land a helicopter. You certainly can't bring it in by a vehicle. So the most expeditious way to do that would be to deliver it by UAS. You could take it right to the site where they need it, and you could do it very rapidly. Well, if your policy is that anything that's operating outside of the laws and the directives, you just have permission to take it down. Well, in this instance, there was very likely not the ability to rapidly get those approvals, to get the flight clearance. So what you would be doing is you would be taking down a potentially life-saving capability to those who need it the most. When most people think about counter UAS capabilities, this last one of providing the operators with countermeasures is one of the more popular areas that people immediately come to mind. Sure, you detect the drone, identify it, but most interesting part to most people is how do you counter that UAS? Clearly, there's kinetic and non-kinetic means, but again, it depends on the situation. What you have available to you, depending upon where you are and what environment you're operating. There's significant work that's been done in this area. We're looking at directed energy, lasers, looking at physical capture or defeat UASs that could fly and intercept the UAS and throw a net on it to capture it, etc. So there's a lot of work, as well as with non-lethal means, particularly where you're worried about collateral damage. So there's things, looking at, how do you can you potentially jam the drone's control link or its GPS signal? Of course, again, in a lot of areas where you don't want these UASs flying, there's a lot of people that are dependent upon a reliable GPS signal. Is there some way to hack into control of the UAS and take control over it? Even a high-powered microwave or some sort of electromagnetic weapons that fry the drone's electronics, that's challenging as well. The potential for damage, collateral damage, can be very significant. Directed energy, a laser, if it's not being absorbed by that UAS and you haven't gotten it on target, well, guess what? That laser is going to continue to transmit, and anything that's in its way is certainly going to be affected by it. So this, again, is another area I believe very, very rich in research and technology development. Previously in this presentation, I've talked about facilities, areas, capabilities, things that we need to protect through the development of counter UAS capabilities. So what is critical infrastructure, and what are our nation's critical infrastructure priorities? I know we have some international partners here with us, but these definitions and these descriptions are the U.S. government's official definitions of these. Critical infrastructure simply includes all the assets, systems, facilities, networks, and other elements that society relies upon to maintain national security, economic vitality, and public health and safety. We know critical infrastructure as power used in homes, water we drink, transportation that moves, the stores we shop, and the internet and communications we rely on to maintain our contact with family, friends, and colleagues. What you see at the top of the page, the top of the slide, are the 4 designated lifeline functions. So the top 3 are all part of the transportation lifeline function, the water function, the energy function, and the communications function. And the reason that they're called lifeline functions is that their reliable operations are so critical that a disruption or loss of one of these functions will directly affect the security and resilience of critical infrastructure within and across numerous sectors. These connections and interdependencies between infrastructure elements and sectors means that the loss of one or more lifeline functions typically has an immediate impact on the operation or mission in multiple sectors. So another way to look at it is those 4 lifeline functions, they all provide something to the remaining critical infrastructure of the United States. So as you go and think through the problems that need to be solved, potential solutions that need to be solved, this is a great starting point, particularly when you're looking at non-defense related counter UAS requirements. Now, there are further definitions of these critical infrastructure, But as you see here, it really encompasses a significant portion of our economy. Kind of like recently during the COVID shutdowns, there was a lot of discussion of what is mission critical, what is essential, what is non-essential. Certainly we can use these infrastructure priorities to determine how we prioritize the development of the counter UAS systems. As you're thinking through these problems, I'd like to share a few thoughts that Nicholas Weaver wrote in a paper published by the Lawfare Institute. It's about a video that was released by the Future of Life Institute called Slaughterbots. Future of Life Institute's intent is to highlight the anticipated dangers posed by autonomous weapons. And this is Nicholas Weaver speaking. But I fear that autonomous weapons are inevitable. This isn't a hypothetical threat tomorrow. It is a real threat today. Simple estimation shows that these weapons would not be difficult to mass produce. While the technology may not be widely available now, once it is, we're facing an issue of unprecedented scale. Our ability to defend ourselves against a threat like the one illustrated in the video is limited. We need a plan for malicious swarms of autonomous weapons in civilian environments. Defeating swarms of UAVs is a DARPA-level problem in a military environment. The current DARPA program is focused on developing systems that can defend a military convoy from attacking swarms. Although the program intends that the results should be low cost and low collateral damage, a military environment may have an comfortably high definition of low. But there isn't the equivalent research and development aimed at even more challenging problem that we face in civilian environments. Environments where we can't open fire with lasers or bullets and where $1 million system is considered outrageously expensive. Instead, we need systems that are both inexpensive and as safe as possible so that when an errant round hits someone, it will annoy or injure instead of maim or kill. And we can't have systems classified as secret spread over cities or in the back of police cars. This is a hard research problem. Governments need to invest the research and development efforts so that when the need arises, we can crank out anti-drone systems quickly. This effort will require a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. The entire video is about 7 minutes long. I'm going to show just a couple minutes of it, but it's certainly food for thought. We discussed earlier on the technological requirements and how artificial intelligence may play a large role in that. We also need to remember that it also will play a large role in any adversaries, either a state or non-state actor, and what types of capabilities they can develop. So I'll just show you this video, let you enjoy that, and then we'll follow up after the video with question and answer discussion period.
Network, taking orders from military, law enforcement, and specialist clients.
The nation is still recovering from yesterday's incident, which officials are describing as some kind of automated attack, which killed 11 U.S. senators at the Capitol building.
They flew in from everywhere but attacked just one side of the aisle. It was chaos. People were screaming.
You can see high windows, very small, precisely punctured to gain entry.
But video is certainly something you don't want to watch right before bed if you want to rest well during the night. It's been fantastic today to be able to share some ideas with you, but more importantly, to continue the conversation and move forward as we identify the threats, assess the risk, and develop the solutions to the counter UAS problem. I'd be delighted to connect with any of you on LinkedIn. Down on the bottom of the slide there is my LinkedIn profile location. Please reach out and we can connect. And I have my email address on that slide as well. But please feel free to contact me. I'd love to help you solve your problems. So at this time, again, thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions and any further discussion.